Friday, August 10, 2018. It was a perfect summer evening in Seattle. The sun was dipping below the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. At Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, thousands of passengers were waiting for their flights. Commuters were driving home on the highway. It was the definition of routine. But down on the tarmac, in the restricted zone known as Cargo 1, one man was breaking the routine. He wasn't a terrorist. He wasn't a spy. He was a 29-year-old ground service agent wearing a uniform that made him invisible. His name was Richard Russell. His friends called him Beebo. Rich walked up to a Bombardier Q400. A 30-ton aircraft designed to carry 76 passengers. He didn't have a pilot's license. He had never flown a plane in his life. He was a baggage handler. His job was to load suitcases, not to conquer the sky. But at 7:32 p.m., the engines of the Q400 began to spool up. Within minutes, the unthinkable happened. A baggage handler taxied a commercial airliner onto runway 16C, throttled the engines to maximum power. Taking off in a commercial airliner is not like driving a car. There are checklists, flaps, hydraulics, trim settings. It requires thousands of hours of training. Rich had none of that. He had video games. He had watched flight simulators on YouTube. Against all laws of physics and probability, the Q400 clawed its way into the air. It didn't crash. It soared. Inside the tower, confusion turned to terror. Controllers are trained for storms, engine failures, and bird strikes. They are not trained for a stolen 76-seat airplane flown by a baggage handler. Was this a terrorist attack? Was he aiming for the Space Needle? Was he going to crash into downtown Seattle? NORAD was alerted. Within minutes, two F-15 Eagle fighter jets were scrambled from Portland. They were supersonic. They were armed. And their orders were clear: if he turns towards the city, shoot him down. But Rich didn't turn towards the city. He turned towards the sunset. And then, he keyed the radio. The world expected to hear a madman. A fanatic screaming demands. Instead, they heard the voice of a young man who sounded surprised. Surprised that he was still alive. On the other end of the line was a controller we now know as Captain Bill. He didn't scream. He didn't panic. He spoke to Rich like a father talking a son off a ledge. For the next hour, thousands of people on the ground listened to a conversation that was surreal, heartbreaking, and strangely intimate. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a confession. To understand why this happened, we have to look away from the sky and back at the ground. Who was the man in the cockpit? Richard Russell wasn't a loner. He wasn't a criminal. He was Beebo. A 29-year-old who ran a bakery with his wife, Hannah. He was the guy who made people laugh. The guy who cleared tables at church functions. But he was also a Horizon Air Ground Service agent. It's a job that makes you invisible. You lift thousands of bags a day. You work in the rain, the snow, and the heat. You watch millions of people fly away to vacations, business meetings, and new lives, while you stay on the tarmac. Rich made $13.75 an hour. In a city like Seattle, where tech giants were building glass towers for millionaires, Rich was barely surviving. On his blog, he wrote about his dreams. He wanted to be a manager. He wanted to join the military, but was rejected for medical reasons. He wanted to visit Alaska. He wrote, "I lift a lot of bags. Like, a lot of bags. So many bags." Behind the smile, there was a quiet desperation. A feeling that many of us know, but few act upon. The feeling of being stuck. The feeling that life is happening to you, not for you. Medical experts would later look for signs of psychosis. But they found none. Friends said he seemed fine. And that is the scariest part of this story. Rich wasn't crazy in the way we want him to be. Back in the sky, the reality of the situation was escalating. The F-15 Eagles had intercepted the Q-400. These are war machines designed to fly at Mach 2.5. The pilots reported seeing Rich in the cockpit. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't struggling with the controls. He was looking out the window, admiring the view. To the F-15 pilots, he was a threat. To Rich, they were just company. For nearly an hour, Rich treated the Puget Sound like his personal playground. He flew past him to Rainier. He checked out the Olympic Mountains. He asked about the coordinates for the orca whale that was carrying her dead calf, a news story that had touched his heart. Even in the middle of a felony hijacking, he was worried about a whale. It was absurd. It was human. And then, he did the impossible. With the sun gone and twilight setting in, Rich pointed the nose of the 30-ton aircraft down. He pulled up. And he initiated a barrel roll. A maneuver that creates massive G-force. A maneuver that can rip the wings off a commercial airliner if done wrong. Aerodynamic experts watched the footage later and gasped. He was feet away from the water. He pulled out of the dive just above the surface of the water. He didn't crash. He didn't die. For a brief moment, he had conquered gravity. He had done something that trained pilots wouldn't dare in that aircraft. But the adrenaline was fading. And as the plane leveled out, the darkness of the night, and the darkness of his situation, began to creep in. The joyride was over. The fuel light was blinking. The F-15s were still on his wing, waiting for him to make a mistake. Captain Bill, the controller, was pleading with him. He offered him runway 16 at McCord Air Force Base. He told him he could land safely. He told him no one had to get hurt. Just a broken guy. When this recording hit the internet, that phrase resonated with millions of people around the world. It wasn't the speech of a villain. It was the speech of a man who looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize himself. A man who was tired. Tired of the grind. Tired of the invisibility. Rich knew he couldn't land. Not really. He asked Captain Bill, "If I land this, do you think Alaska will give me a job as a pilot?" Bill replied, "I think you could get a job doing anything if you pull this off." Rich laughed. "Yeah, right. Nah, I'm a white guy." Referring to prison/criminal record. He knew the consequences. If he landed, he would go to federal prison for life. The freedom he had tasted for the last 60 minutes would be gone forever. He had stolen a moment of absolute liberty. And the price of that liberty was everything. The fuel was gone. One engine flamed out. Rich didn't scream. He didn't cry. He simply said he felt lightheaded. At 8:47 p.m., 73 minutes after takeoff, the Q-400 descended into the dense forest of Ketron Island. There was no explosion of anger. Just a final, quiet descent into the trees. The crash site was small. The Q-400 had shattered into thousands of pieces in a dense patch of forest. The FBI arrived within hours. They were looking for a manifesto. They were looking for terror links. They were looking for a reason. But all they found was the wreckage of a stolen plane and the remains of a man who just wanted to see the mountains one last time. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. The media tried to label him a criminal. But the internet mourned him. People began calling him Sky King. They didn't see a hijacker. They saw a reflection of their own hidden pain. They saw a man who was crushed by the weight of a mundane life and decided to trade it all for 1 hour of absolute, terrifying freedom. His family released a statement. He was a warm, compassionate man. "We are stunned and heartbroken." The investigation concluded that Rich acted alone. He didn't want to hurt anyone. In fact, in his final moments, he steered away from populated areas to ensure he was the only casualty. He wasn't a pilot. He wasn't a terrorist. He was just Beebo. Richard Russell's flight lasted 73 minutes. In the grand scheme of history, it is a blink of an eye. But for those 73 minutes, a baggage handler touched the face of God. His story is a tragic warning about mental health and the invisible battles men fight every day. But it is also a strange testament to the human spirit. The part of us that looks at the sky and wonders, what if? We all have a few screws loose. We all feel broken sometimes. If you are feeling like Rich did, please reach out. You don't have to fly away to be free.